Okay, so we are recording. This is the first time I think I've actually recorded a Zoom meeting, so we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to go over today is just, I want to show you some images, thinking about our next segment, which is time. And then I want to introduce the article that I have for you for this segment. And then I guess this will be for Dan and then the people who are watching the recording, some information on how to make a contact sheet. So
Okay.
um, and so I guess at that point, Larry, if you want to dip out, that's fine because you already know how to make a contact sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I always think to myself, oh, shoot, what did I leave open when I...
Yeah.
um, that's fine. It's usually my email. Um, all right. Oh, there's Caitlin. Okay, cool. Hi, Caitlin. Just so you know, I'm recording right now. Okay. So the images that I pulled thinking about time are certainly not an end-all be-all list of photographers who work with the idea of time. But what I wanted to do was pull a variety of photographers or a variety of photographers working in different ways. And so, you may also have some other artists that you have in mind when you think about the idea of working with time. The first image here is this photograph by Joseph Nicephore Niepce, which is View from the Window at Le Gras. And this is actually considered the first photograph, which is interesting because this is dated 1827. And we know that photography is considered to have been invented in 1839. So it's interesting to me that this photograph comes from 12 years before that like official invention date. But the reason that I start my lecture with this is because this being the very first photographic exposure considered to be, it was something like 8 or 12 hours long. And this is, it's really hard to see this image, and it's probably even harder for you all to see it through Zoom. But maybe do a Google search later and see what other versions of it you can see. It also exists. The original photograph is housed in Houston, and I can't remember exactly which university it's at, but I can get that to you. And it's the kind of thing that you could make an appointment to go and see in person. But I think what's interesting about this photograph is that because it was exposed for such a long time, the buildings are actually illuminated from both sides because the sun moved across the sky over this 8 hours. And so we get this distorted sense of space because we're used to seeing images where the light source is pretty definite from one direction. But once you start exposing things for a long amount of time, the light obviously changes and we're getting illumination from both the east and the west. Also interesting about this photograph, you don't see any humans, because if there was anybody moving, the exposure is so long it's not going to capture any forms. If one person had been standing in one specific spot for that entire 8 hours, we might have a ghostly figure. But um, you are probably not going to make a photograph like this. But I think it's important to touch base with our beginnings. And I put these in relative chronological order. These are images by Edward Muybridge. You've probably seen them. And he's really the photographer who paved the way for motion pictures. So I brought him in because he's obviously working with this idea of capturing time through multiple frames. And his interest really was less in time and more in capturing motion through multiple photographs. But in capturing motion, he's also capturing time. And this photograph, or this set of photographs of the horse galloping, was actually based on a bet that he made with the guy who founded Stanford, Mr. Stanford, I can't remember his first name, about whether a horse has all four hooves off the ground at one time when it's galloping. And, Stanford said, there's no way. And Muybridge said, yes, I'll prove it. And Muybridge wins the bet through these photographs. Edward Muybridge is a super weird character. Oh my gosh. There's a great book by Rebecca Solnit called River of Shadows, and it really outlines his life. And it is, I mean, he's just really bizarre. He comes from England, and he's in this like horrible horse and carriage accident and possibly has head trauma, moves to San Francisco, does a lot of landscape photography, photographs at Yosemite, but then becomes really obsessed with these motion studies. So he photographs all kinds of things moving, this donkey, and then he moves on to photographing people and thinking about how people move. He photographed himself a lot. He's got a lot of these motion studies of himself in the nude. And then people just doing weird things. And there, again, it really, you can see how it paves the path to the motion picture. And he actually, I don't want to ruin the story for you, but he actually ends up murdering somebody and is acquitted. And it's really like, it's such a good book. You should like absolutely read this book, River of Shadows. It's historical, but is really entertaining. Like you can't put it down. That's a side note. That has nothing to do with time, but these photographs do. Harold Edgerton is an artist who was brought up in that Sontag article that we looked up with the photograph of the drop of milk. And I think he's got an interesting approach to documenting time where, the amount of time of a golf swing is probably less than a minute. Yes, I don't golf, but, so we're seeing probably a few seconds worth of time. And he's capturing that using strobe lights. So that's why we have this sort of stuttered appearance. You may not have access to strobe lights, but maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe your family owns a party business and you do have a strobe light. You could experiment with it. But he's also, I think, like Muybridge, exploring time and motion. And then, of course, you'll remember that if you've got a slower shutter speed and something in motion, you're going to get this blurred effect as well. So we've got kind of two things happening there. Harold Edgerton was actually a physicist working at MIT and really was interested in studying motion. His earlier work is all in black and white. And then we get into the 1960s and he's embracing the newness of color photography. And this is like frozen time. I mean, like really a millisecond, right? And you can do something like this with a fast shutter speed. Are you going to get a bullet, going through an apple with just a fast shutter speed? No, he's using a fast shutter speed and a flash. So you could experiment if you've got a flash on your camera. And again, I'm showing you like this wide variety of ways that artists have thought about time visually, and it's up to you to decide how you want to explore time. This artist, Hiroshi Sugimoto, is a contemporary artist He started working in the 70s and he's still working today. He has this series that I just absolutely love of movie theaters. And what he does is he goes into the theater. I mean, you can see this is 1993. He's got some that are from the late 70s, and he's got some, I mean, he's continued this series. So there are some of these photographs that I've seen that I think are as recent as 2016, 2017. But he goes into the theater and opens his shutter for the duration of the movie. And it's so dark in the theater. If you can remember a time when we went to movies, it's so dark in the theater, our eyes don't see all of this glorious detail. But having the shutter open for that long, enough light bounces off of those surfaces and to the film surface that image is recorded. But because of that long exposure, the movie becomes just this complete white rectangle. And of course, he's going to, like the fanciest theaters. This isn't like I haven't been to the movies here. Well, I did go to the movies here when I lived here before, but I haven't been to the movies here recently. He's a Japanese photographer. Another series of his are these images of the sea. And these again are fairly long exposures. So it really just becomes, I mean, what you're seeing now probably through your Zoom screen from my, whatever I pulled from Google is probably pretty accurate to what you experience when you see it in person. It's really just about these grays and the horizon line. And these, he prints them pretty big. They're like maybe 16 by 20, I think. It's totally breaking the rule by putting the horizon line right on the center. But sometimes you have to do that. This one is my favorite. Another way that photographers often will show time is through a series of photographs. So the Muybridge photographs were a series of photographs, but ultimately he would print them on a single card altogether. Well, Nicholas Nixon is one of the many photographers who has documented a set of people or a single person over the course of decades, really. So Nicholas Nixon is still photographing today, and this is his series, The Brown Sisters, one of whom is his wife. I don't know which one, but he started in the 70s. I don't think this is the first one. It might be, but this is 1975, 1984. So we're 9 years later. 1992. 2016. And this is just a selection of his whole series. I mean, he takes a photograph of these sisters every year. And a lot of photographers do this. Actually, two of my graduate professors, one of them takes a photo. He and his daughter have the same birthday. So they take a portrait of the two of them together every day on their birthdays. One of my graduate professors takes a photograph of his daughter every birthday also. They know each other. But anyways, it's not an uncommon thing. And I think actually Nicholas Nixon, these photographs were going around on the internet maybe 5 years ago or something. There was a HuffPost article about him. Do you have 3 decades to create your work about time? No, but you could photograph the same person or the same place or the same thing over the course of 2 weeks. what is something that changes over time? A rotting apple, a flower, things like that. So speaking of one of my graduate professors, Mark Klett is actually the guy who photographs himself with his daughter every year. But he really, and I just made a link here because his website is better than any PowerPoint that I would put together. He did this very expansive project in the 70s called the Rephotographic Project, where he found historic photographs, often taken by photographers like Timothy O'Sullivan. So this image on the left, I believe, is Timothy O'Sullivan. And then, Zoom just gets in my way. Oh yeah, it is Sullivan, okay. And then this image on the right is his rephotograph of the same spot. And he's actually like really meticulous about how he does these rephotographs. He's in the same exact vantage point at the same, sets the tripod at the same exact height. He's using the same or as close to the same lens as the original photographer. And I want to say, while he may not be using the exact same camera, he's using the same format. So if the one on the left was an 8x10 view camera, then he's using an 8x10 view camera to recreate or rephotograph. He then went on, so he did this with a whole bunch of photographs. So this one, the rephotograph is in 1979. And then he went on to do something called third view. Well, son of a gun. I guess. Okay, well, I'll just tell you about it. I guess maybe it's under recent projects. I don't think it's that recent though. Where he went back to those same spots and did a third view. And actually, I guess since I'm on the internet here, oh, okay. Well, in your own time, check out thirdview.org. It's actually an interactive website that you can go in and you can see the original photograph, you can see his rephotograph from the 70s, and you can overlap them and you can see the most recent photograph. It's actually a pretty neat website. Apparently you need to have your JavaScript updated in order to view it. So that's an interesting, and that's related to that Nicholas Nixon series of the Brown sisters, of photographing the same place over time. Or, and I think actually somebody did this in intro photo last semester. They went to the courthouse and found records of old photographs of Lake Charles, and then went back and rephotographed those same places. So that's the kind of thing you could do too over the next 2 weeks. You could find, or maybe you've got some family photographs of the house that you grew up in, and you can go back and rephotograph it. That's a way of showing time through photography. Mark Klett also does a lot of collaborations, and one of his collaborators is Byron Wolfe. And this is an interesting panorama, I guess, where they started off with a photograph of Ansel Adams on the right here, and then they continued the panorama by moving the camera, around. But they took this series of photographs over the course of 2 days. So we're showing again space, time, and time in kind of two layers, where we're extending the Ansel Adams photograph, which is probably from the 50s, and now extending that image into 2007. And this is another example of their collaboration where they're combining images. So I don't know, I feel like the black and white photographs are historic photographs, but I'm not entirely sure. But again, this idea of combining snippets of time from two different times. And that could be over a century, or it could be over a day, or it could be over an hour. David Hockney is an artist who is more well known for his paintings, but he also has a whole collection of photography that he's done. And he's working with Polaroids. These are from 1980 something. My Zoom screen's in the way, 1982, where here he's taken a series of 12 Polaroid photographs of someone swimming in the pool. And again, it's this like disjointed view of space and time. And this is one that you've probably seen before, Pear Blossom Highway. And this is taken over the course of a week. And it's, if you can't see it, it's many, 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 many snapshots, like 4x6 glossies that he photographed and then collaged together to create one space. So this is one image made up of photographs that were taken over the span of a week. And now you can do this in Photoshop. You just go out and take a whole bunch of photographs, you go into Photoshop, you do a photo merge, and it just does it for you. He's like Scotch taping these all together. Not the most archival. And this is the last artist that I'm going to show you, Dwayne Michaels. He works in series as well. He writes on his photographs, and I know we're not really in a position to print anything right now unless you have a printer at home, but if writing on including text in your work is something you want to explore, then by all means you can type on it in Photoshop if you want. You can try and handwrite it, I suppose, with your trackpad. But here, The Spirit Leaves the Body from 1968 is, it's a series about death. And he's utilizing time in two ways. He's got the 7 frames that tell us the narrative, but then he's also using a long exposure to get that ghostly figure, to get that spirit. This is another one about death. Death comes to the old lady. And again, using that series of photographs plus the slow shutter speed to create the sense of ghostliness, motion, evaporation. I didn't have the opportunity, but he came and spoke at a university near me when I was in Richmond, and I had friends who went, and I guess he was just really entertaining, a very entertaining speaker. He's an old man now, and but he was apparently quite, I don't know, vivacious. This is absolutely hands down my favorite series of his, Things Are Queer. Take a minute to read the photographs from top left to bottom right. It's so good. There's also another series of his that I couldn't find, but it's of two people passing in an alleyway. But again, you know, here he's definitely playing with space, and time and humor. And then his last one, again, humorous. I build a pyramid, and it's really just a set of 6 images of him making a pile of rocks, but he's doing it in Egypt with the pyramids as the backdrop. He's arranged it in this like film strip, like a photo booth kind of experience. But uh, just again, showing time, also showing humor, which is something that I think sometimes we can forget about in photography. That art can be humorous. There's no reason not to be funny. Yeah, that's my last shot there. How do I exit? Okay. So, like I said, that is by no means a comprehensive list of photographers. And in fact, this is the photographers that I showed you. Well, one, I didn't want to overwhelm you with a bajillion photographers. And two, I'm kind of incorporating a history of photography into these slide lectures too, so that you're building a foundation of artists with whom you're familiar with. However, I did want to share with you, I don't know why I even came out of my share screen. I did want to share with you this database that you might be interested in. I'm part of the Society for Photographic Education, which is a nationwide, well, it's actually an international society. And we have yearly meetings, conferences. Unfortunately, this year we were going to be in Denver, but we're just going to be online. And something that we've done in that group is put together this list of it's an inclusivity photographer database, because something we've been talking about a lot in our conversations, and we meet actually weekly or bi-weekly, is the fact that so much of the history that we share with our students is white male artists. And you know, because that's what our history books have. And so we started compiling this list of artists who are people of color and female or non-binary. And it's a little bit overwhelming. It's an overwhelming list, but we've organized it into this sort of type of photography process, et cetera. So it's worth taking a peek at. If, you know, there's nothing on here that says time, but if you are interested in portraiture, Larry Reed, you know, maybe come in here, and I'll post the link to this. Maybe come in here and, you know, check out this artist's work. If you are interested in narrative, well, that has to do with time. You know, maybe come in and check this person's work out. And it's nice because we've got websites to everybody. So this is a really cool resource to broaden our horizons in the canon of the history of our medium. So I'll post a link to that. And okay, let's see. Let me bring it over here to Moodle for a sec. I guess I should ask, does anybody have any questions so far?
Nope, none.
Nope. Feeling good? Okay. In Moodle, I've uploaded this essay. Well, it's not really an essay. It's a conversation between two people in the photo world. And it's from this book, On Being a Photographer. I probably should have noted that on the PDF somewhere, but this is what it's from. And the entire book is a conversation, that what they did is they recorded 12 hours of conversation and then transcribed the important stuff. And it's between Bill Jay, who was a photographer and photo historian, and David Hearn, who was a photographer for Magnum. And again, this essay doesn't necessarily have to do with time specifically, but it does have to do with timing. And really, they've got some really good observations. It's a 10-page document, but it's really, fun to read because it's a dialogue. So I just wanted to give you a little introduction on that and why I felt it was relevant. And again, if you enjoy it and you want to get the whole book, it's On Being a Photographer. It was apparently $12.95. Can probably get it for cheaper on Amazon. I don't know. Okay, do you think I can go over making contact sheets in 7 minutes?
Yeah, the contact sheets are really easy.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the vote of confidence. Okay.
Also, the photo you're talking about the two people in the alleyway, I believe that was called Chance Meeting or
Yes,
Chance Meeting.
it is.
Yeah.
Chance meeting. Okay, obviously I was scanning this and it kept making a new document. Okay. The way that I make contact sheets, and there are several ways to do this, but I'm just going to show you the way that I do it. I do it in Photoshop. You can do it in Lightroom. I don't remember how to do it in Lightroom. So, so here's how to do it in Photoshop. The first thing you have to do is put all of your photographs in a single folder and on the desktop or somewhere. Caitlin, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay, all right, cool. So you put all your photographs in a single folder and make sure you know where they are. Then you're going to go to File, Automate, and you're going to choose Contact Sheet 2. I don't know why it's Contact Sheet 2. I've been using Photoshop since 1998, and I have never seen Contact Sheet 1. So I don't know. Choose Contact Sheet 2. There we go. My computer's running kind of slow. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I have 5,000 documents of shooting the single picture open in Photoshop. Here we go. Okay. In this dialog box, you've got some options. You can choose, you could do all of your open documents, but I don't recommend, I mean, if you've gone out and done a Photoshop, a photo shoot of 200 photographs, I wouldn't open them all. So instead of doing open documents, you're going to choose folder. And then you're going to go to choose so that you can find the folder you want to use. So we'll say, we'll do this, contemporary photographers. And if you've got subfolders within that folder that you want to include, then check this. And you'll want to make your document 8 by 10 inches, 300 pixels per inch, RGB color, your bit depth 8. I mean, all this is the default color profile. You've got this option to flatten all layers. I would not flatten them in the event that you want to move things around after you've done it, but just know that that is an option and that will make your file much smaller if you do go ahead and flatten. And then you've got some options on your thumbnails. I do like to do place across first. That means it'll place them left to right based on file name. And you're going to do, well, this is up to you, how many columns and rows you want. If you want to emulate a traditional film contact sheet, then you should have 7 columns and 5 rows, because that'll give you 35. But then that makes your thumbnails very small. So I apologize for the slowness of my computer. So 7 by 5 will give you 35 thumbnails, but that can be kind of hard to see. So if you prefer, you could do, 5 by 4 so that you only got 20 images on the contact sheet. There we go. I would not rotate for best fit. That way they're all oriented in the proper orientation. And this is up to you if you want to use the file name as caption. Sometimes that helps in finding your files. All that being said, I'm going to say okay, and Photoshop is hopefully going to do some magic. So I'm not doing anything. It's just automatically, it's opening each one of those files and basically copying and pasting and shrinking it onto my new document. And this is just super exciting. I hope it finishes in the next minute. I chose that folder because I didn't think there were very many things in it. I can tell it's doing something because it's like flashing, so I'm not concerned. And you can see where it's starting to go here. So if we get cut off, your last step will be to just save them. And I would save them, you can save them as Photoshop files if you ever want to move the little thumbnails around, or you can save it as a JPEG. And this I would keep in your folder with your images for your own sake so that you've got this point of reference. But moving forward, I also want you to upload your contact sheets into your folder for the class because I want to see what you didn't choose to turn in. I want to see the photographs right before and right after the one that you did decide was the best one. And that is all I have for you. Tuesday, we don't